place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, October 28th, 2024, and this is episode 966 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Monday show. So we're having a podcast about a main topic plus all of our usual segments. And if you're joining me, definitely let other people know that we are live. That would be awesome. I think I was supposed to get the show notice out and I didn't. So I should probably do that while I'm talking to you. Anyway, today we're going to talk about hopeless situations, and we're going to talk about how life is a choice. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this just based on what's happened in our network and in society and all over the place in the last 6 or 8 weeks. Where some really terrible stuff has happened and some really great stuff has happened. And it made me reevaluate some of my priorities. And then as a result of that, I was like, life is a choice. So we'll talk about that. We also will have all of our usual segments, and that includes Tales from the Prepper Pantry, the Shopping Report, and Operation Independence. Okay. With that, I am going to thank our first sponsor of our show before we jump into everything, and that's Agorist Tax Advice. Matthew Sorsley over at agoristaxadvice.com has put together a whole service line where you can work with him to evaluate all of your finances, look at how the money comes in, how it goes out, take advantage of the tax code and use it to your advantage to keep more of your money in your pocket. So he'll analyze your finances, talk to you about different ways you can structure your business, and then talk to you about all the write-offs that are associated with that, how to track them, any risks associated with them, so you can choose what you want to do or the best path forward. He also, I believe, has bookkeeping services you can add on and some other things. Check that out over at agoristaxadvice.com. Our second sponsor of today's show is also all about money. Today's show is all about money. And it's John Pugliano of the Wealth Studying Podcast. John Pugliano has a great podcast called the Wealth Studying Podcast, and it's been going on for a while. And one of the things I like about it, a couple of things. One, sometimes I want a long podcast to listen to while I'm working in the garden, but other times what I want is a short podcast to listen on a short drive. And his is about 15 minutes, very digestible increments about how he's making money decisions, how he's making investment choices. And that's from a homesteader's perspective. Check it out at thewealthstudyingpodcast.com. We have a few shows today, but I do want to remind you, if you're on the, you know what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy the thing with the stuff. You know what the thing with the stuff is? The thing with the stuff is that if I were to have my YouTube link and I don't know, share it to the social networks, I bet people would be really thrilled live. Or if you're listening to this live right now, you can let them know. But I am definitely going to let the Telegram group know because they are usually the ones who get stuff done for me. And I don't know where my head was today. What was happening? Right before the show was supposed to start, knock on the door, benchmark signs, the new Living Free in Tennessee sign came for the studio. And I was like, I bet if I hustle, I can get that sign up. And I got the sign up and then forgot to tell y'all we were going live. So I'm just going to share it out on Telegram. And then if you're on this live, let folks know on our other groups. But what do you guys think of my sign? Isn't that pretty cool? I wanted something that was a little bit more readable than the other one, which with the black background wasn't as readable as I'd like it. And I know it looks crooked in the black background. I will deal with that. It's not crooked. I think my computer is crooked. So that goes back to resetting up the other camera I had. So just trying to make the studio just a little better every time. That's the goal here, right? Just move stuff forward one step at a time, kind of like I tell you to do with my 3 things. Okay, our live stream schedule this week. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning, I have my live stream that I have every week. Only this week, it's a little bit different. When I was at Self-Reliance Festival, I was talking with Jack Spirko and CJ was there. And I was like, well, we've got a bunch of geese here right now. And wouldn't it be interesting to have an Unloose the Goose reunion episode, like 4 years ago, right before the election, we were still going once a week. And we had all sorts of things to say about the election. And then the election happened and things were like crazy in 2020 after the election. So I was like, it'd be interesting, like 4 years later, reunion episode right before the election. Let's do it. And so I shot out an email, and whoever answered their email got on the show. And we've got an Unloose the Goose reunion episode tomorrow at 9:30. And I just sent out all the notes to the folks who are going to be on. Who's going to be on with me. I'm going to be on with Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. And we've got a few news articles to talk about, including banks having $516 billion in losses looming on their horizon. That should be a fun one to talk about. CJ Kilmer from the Dangerous History Podcast. He was thinking it might be interesting to talk about all the weird, unprecedented things that have happened in the last few months leading up to the election. John Bush from the Live Free Academy and Exit and Build Land Summit and all of his other endeavors. And he'll be talking with us about building the counter economy. And then I'll be there, of course, Nicole Sauce. So that's at 9:30 in the morning, you guys. It's going to be a fun show. And the way Unloose the Goose works is that we have some like an outline of what we want to cover, but we also take questions. So you can totally get your questions in on that. In fact, today on the show, because this show is about something that may make you think some thoughts, I do ask that you put the word question or comment in all caps, but I will try to work your stuff in as well as we can. Okay. Also this week, on Thursday, I am getting together with Amy Dingman from A Farmer's Kind of Life at 12:30 for a Spicy Sisters. I'm not sure what we're talking about yet. We'll probably have that conversation in the next 2 days. But usually we've both been sort of, it's weird. She'll put out a show and I'll be like, I just put out a show on that. Or I'll put out a show and she'll be like, I just put out a show on that. So usually we're on the same wavelength about homesteading things and other stuff going on in society, and basically how to be a decent person and make yourself better a little bit every day. So the Spicy Sister episode will be then. My computer is trying to hijack the audio. You know what happens? I use, for webinars and such, I use Zoom sometimes. And if I use Zoom one time and I don't reboot my whole computer and reset the whole system, it just starts trying to take my audio away in the middle of the podcast. It's like, well, do you want to use Zoom audio? And I'm like, why would I want to use Zoom audio? I'm not using Zoom. So I've got to figure that out. Or I may just like, I have 2 old computers and I might make one dedicated Zoom computer. So this one never has to be on Zoom ever again. That might happen because it started to, like, one of these times I'm going to be talking and it's just going to be like, whoop, Zoom just took the audio away. And I'm going to be sad about that because then I have to do editing on the audio on the podcast, and that's not where I love to spend my time. So speaking of webinars, on Wednesday at 6 p.m., Ryan Steva is giving a member webinar all about how to develop off-grid water on your homestead. If you're a member, right after this show, the link will be added for you to check out that webinar. Okay, Friday homestead happenings at 9:30. With that, it's time to talk about the first usual Monday segment, which is Tales from the Prepper Pantry. And this is where we talk about using what you store and storing what you use. And I think I had just told you last week, I found out the farmer we usually buy a cow from doesn't have a cow for us. So I have a cow I split with a friend. So I definitely have a half cow coming. But we went through 2 whole cows last year. I bought a half cow from Don Gorham. I bought a whole second cow from the farmer that we are buying the half cow with my friend from. And we've gone through almost all that beef in 1 year. That's 2 cows of beef in 1 year. And part of that is because we have a meat-based diet here, but also, we don't go to the store and buy beef and serve it to people. If people come over for events or for dinner and we serve something, we use the same farm food for that we eat here. Like for the permaculture tree class that we have with Carrie Brown, that's partnering with trees on the permaculture homestead on Saturday, I am making homemade chicken soup from chickens that were raised here for the lunch. That's the hot dish of the lunch. And then we'll have cold cuts and other salads and other things. So that's what we've always done. And last year, apparently, I had enough people here that we went through almost 2 whole cows. So that was super exciting. I also didn't have a venison last year. And so usually one of the meals at the spring workshop is game based or venison based. But if you don't shoot the animal, then you don't get the venison, right? That's just the way the cookie crumbles on that one. So Ken Esch put out, hey, I've got a quarter cow for sale. I'm like, if it was a half, I'd buy it. And he's like, yeah, but do you want to buy the quarter cow? And I was like, actually, I do. So he was an hour and a half from my house when he put that message out on Facebook, and he dropped by my place on his way home. And it just so happened I had my deep freezer on because I've been using it for like new incoming things to keep them separate from the use it up piles in the other ones. And I have my meat separated by like pork is here, beef is there, chicken is there, seafood is like, so it's all by kind. Lamb is there. And to do that, that means I have a couple of freezers that are not all the way full, plus the deep freeze. And I was bringing things in ahead of Self-Reliance Festival, and I just left it on with the couple of things that were in there because I didn't want to mess up the other organization without fully committing to doing a whole, like redo of the organization. So I was like, well, it just so happens my deep freezer is ready for you. And if we put the beef straight in there, then the use it up beef is in the beef freezer. And the new beef is in the holding like the holding place in the deep freezer. And then once we use up the rest of that beef, which will be, I'm going to guess about 3 more weeks and we're done with what's in that freezer, maybe less. Well, I'm going to Jack's Spirko, so it might be right after Jack's workshop. That will all then lead to the winter event, which is redoing how all the freezers are, because we're in a fill it up mode for the freezers and we're in a use it up mode for all the vegetables that have been canned or frozen or dried, because we're not producing all that many vegetables on the homestead at this time of year. I wrapped the garden this fall, and I have a fall bed with some Swiss chard in it that the stupid chickens got into yesterday, which pisses me off because they pulled out like 5 of my plants. So I have a small bed that's appropriate for 2 people to have a meal of Swiss chard greens or whatever twice a week. That's sort of the volume I'm growing right now. And then my aquaponics system, one bed's almost all marigolds that just self-seeded this year. I've got a giant sage plant. I've got jalapeno peppers, and we haven't had another freeze since the one that I eked everything through. So I'm like, we'll let those peppers keep growing until they can't grow anymore. I'll do a harvest this week, though, on all the red ones. And then it's also got a little bit of Swiss chard from last year that has been around. It's almost 2 years old now. And it's getting long. And like, there's a point where Swiss chard is just like, I'm going to turn into a Swiss chard tree and be tough. And that's kind of where it's going. So it's time to reset that. So I'll probably get some winter lettuce going and have it in those outside aquaponics beds and see how it does. And I'm still on the fence about if we're setting up the inside grow system. So the way we keep fresh vegetables in the winter here is by growing what we can seasonally. And that means for part of the year, we grow sprouts and lettuces and herbs and things indoors. And that's awesome, but it also takes up time and space. And with the renewed focus on pushing hollow roast right now, we'll see how much time I dedicate to that. I don't know, it just depends. Like it's really nice to have the fresh lettuce though, and store lettuce just does not. It doesn't taste the same. It's good, but it's not that good, right? Also in use it up mode, like we have all of the organs on the menu. I've got tongues to cook and hearts to cook and livers to do something with. And when the new cow came in, the new quarter cow, it came with a tongue and some organs. And I actually just put those straight into the use it up pile. And that's after watching the video from Self-Reliance Festival from Hand Hewn Homestead, where they did a processing class and then they did a session on just how to make meat taste good. And they talked about like, how do you cook a spleen and make a spleen taste good? And they figured it out by cooking spleens and having spleens that tasted bad until they figured out how to make them taste good. Those guys are a wealth of information, by the way. You should totally check out their channel. But what they said is when they process a pig, they just go ahead and cook all the organs right then and use them up. Like they either get made into something like sausage or just used up, because they're like, what are you going to do? You're going to put this organ in a bag in the freezer and then you have to thaw it out and do something with it. And like, if you just use it and get it prepped and made into kidney pie or something for dinner, it's done, it's eaten up, and you're not like staring down the barrel of what I have right now, which is a big pile of organs to eat out of the freezer. And I'm not a huge organ meat fan. So some of these things, the way they get used up is they're going to be made into dog treats, to be completely honest. Or Nighthawk likes liver and onions, so I have a tendency to give him livers, for example. So, but we do have like all the weird cuts of meat and all the organs on the menu. And I've found some really fun ways to cook that stuff, like that shawarma recipe that I discovered online. The cool thing about shawarma is they're not all the same. It's kind of like curry. There's different flavors of it. So you can do one shawarma one week and then adjust it for the next week. And it's a great way for me to use up the beef stew meat, which you would think, why not make beef stew? But I like to make beef stew out of roasts because they're a little bit more tender in the stew. And usually the stew meat is a little chewier. And so you want to go like low and slow for longer. And that actually works great in a curry or a shawarma, or I can grind it if I want to. Like there's, my grinder is back home. We left that at SRF. So that was in John Willis's pole barn until Andrew picked it up last weekend. And then he was at the Eversoles get shit done weekend. And we had a barn raising this weekend. It was really fun. So it's kind of cool how the community works. It's like you leave something somewhere 3 hours away and it ends up back in your living room within a couple days because somebody's driving through. Time to schedule the processing of the rams. So we'll have 4 rams processed. I'm selling one. I've already sold one. And then I have 2 that we're keeping for our own meat purposes. So I expect that processing date to be towards the end of November, but it may go over into December. I was actually just talking to Tactical about like how the rotation is working for the lambs on the homestead. The rams are on my homestead because we're working 2 properties right next door to each other. And we have the sheep over, like the main herd over on another bigger pasture area. And then we've been rotating the rams through here, which is actually really great for my land because they're eating down the underbrush and then pooping, and then better things are growing. So they've done a pretty good job. I would like to keep the waves of sheep coming through my property on a regular schedule. And the only challenge with that is when you have 2 flocks of sheep to manage, that's more things to manage and it's more time intensive. And we don't want to bring the whole flock over with the livestock guardian dogs with the pet dogs here also, because there's a good chance that could blow up into something I don't want to have happen, which is the livestock guardian dogs killing one of my dogs. And I'm pretty sure the LGDs would win in that situation. So the ram processing should happen soon. And then we'll be talking about all the lamb recipes. And I've been doing a lot of digging into different ways that people spice, because I just cook lamb like I cook beef, right? But a lot of people use some stronger tasting spices like garlic or rosemary, especially if it's an older animal that has a stronger flavor, just to sort of counteract the strong lamb flavor. I like lamb flavor, so I'm actually totally fine with salt, pepper, and medium rare on a lamb chop. But I've been talking to people who are like, I want to like lamb, and I've had lamb at restaurants and I like it, but I just don't, when I cook it, it's not quite the same. And there's 2 things going on. Store lamb tastes different than fresh lamb that you get from a farm. So there's that. And lamb that's 3 years old tastes different than lamb that's not even a year old. Like we're processing it about 9 months on mine. So I've been looking at other spice profiles besides garlic and rosemary that are done all over the world, just because it's, like, so curries and different things, to start getting some recommendations for people when they buy lamb from us. Like, this is how I would do that. Like, somebody just texted me, I found a piece of meat called neck roast. And I'm like, oh yes, last time I sold lamb meat, there were neck roasts in there. And that's a slow and low situation. And that's like shawarma, curry, like all of those sorts of different flavors are really good with that. We are replenishing systems here. So I'm setting up new garden systems this year. And that's taking a lot more time than I thought it would, but I'm glad I'm doing it. We're doing improvements on systems. And then because we've had a fall that hasn't been very cold this year, we're getting the benefit of having more time to harvest herbs, teas, those sorts of things that you dry. So yesterday, coming back from the Eversoles, a little tired from that whole experience and the other experience on Saturday, which eventually you'll hear about. And I was like, I'm supposed to make a rabbit tractor today. I don't feel like doing that. And is this one of those times where I make myself do it, or do I go do something else? And I decided, I haven't really invested much time in getting my tea collection going. So I spent a good amount of time getting chocolate mint harvested and set up and some other things like that done. And I just saw today, like, I have another giant pile of oregano that I can harvest down by the swim spa. So it's just sort of a gift, because usually by this time of year, the oregano might still be there. The basil is gone. I've got more basil to harvest. And then there's also all of the mints are still out. So they're looking like they think it's fall though. So it's a couple of the ones I had were looking crispy and I didn't harvest those, but there's some decent herbs and teas to be harvested right now of the leaf variety. Okay. Next up, we have the weekly shopping report, and that's from Joe, who just usually goes to multiple stores, but this week he just went to Aldi, and he says the following: they still have not restocked the wet cat food. In fact, I'm not even sure I saw individual cups. They did have a normal amount of toilet paper. The chocolate I like was back in stock after being gone last week, but there wasn't much of it. Staple prices were bread at $1.39. Eggs, $2.15, and that's down from last week. Whole milk, $2.88. Heavy cream, $5.39. Orange juice, $3.45. Butter, $3.99. Bacon, $3.99. Potatoes, $3.59. That's down from last week. Sugar, $2.99. Flour, $2.35. And 80% lean ground beef, $4.49. $4.49. Wow. Okay, so 80% lean ground beef at the cheap store is $4.49 a pound. I just paid $5 a pound, which is, higher than I usually pay for like a whole animal for a quarter. Just saying. And the ground beef is $4.49. And I got steaks and roasts and a tongue and liver and ground beef and brisket. I'm going to make brisket bacon. That's my plan. Okay. I did check the online price of a 2x8x4 at Home Depot, $3.85. Gallon of untainted regular remains at $3.59.9. That number is not going to budge till after the election. That's my prediction. Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lives, as well as learning skills so you can avoid a need to pay a guy to do a thing. Although sometimes it totally makes sense to pay a guy to do a thing, right? So this is where the other story comes in of the weekend. So Saturday, the Eversoles had a get shit done weekend at their place, where the goal was they had a pad poured and they're putting a garage building up there. And so it was to put the building up, because like putting the walls up takes extra hands, and then getting the sheathing on and getting the roof up and the roofing and all of that. It just takes time, and many hands make light work. Well, it wasn't light work, but so they had a bunch of people over, and unfortunately the scheduling of it was that I needed to drop my mom at the airport and then go out there. So my plan was drop mom at the airport, get out there, see how I can help, be there for a little while Sunday morning, and then come back and do stuff here. That was my plan, because I had a fundraiser Friday night. I was working with my choir, and so I get going on that, and at the same time, we've just gotten power to the swim spa. And so I'm like going through cycles of like adding things to the water, and you rotate it and you wait and you add other things to the water to get it all balanced out. And I was just at the spot before I add chlorine. And then when you add chlorine, you have to wait for an hour for it to off gas. And then I think you can get in after that. Well, I was like, well, before I add the chlorine, I'm going to swim in the swim spa, and then I'm going to drive mom to the airport, and then I'm going out to the Eversoles, right? So, and then mom was here, so she got to try it too. So we did that. We totally did a little swim in the swim spa, and then I added the chlorine and hit circulate, and then it was time for me to go. And so you have to leave the cover off for an hour, and they want you to run the jets a few times, right, on the thing to move it around. And so I was like, hey, Tactical, let me show you how to turn the jets on. So while I'm gone, you can turn them on 2 more times and then put the cover back on when that's done. And then when I come back Sunday afternoon, I'll do a swim. And then I needed to add something they call Spa Shock, which is, it looks like it's a bunch of like concentrated hydrogen peroxide in powder form. It's OxyClean. I don't know. It's something like that. So I go down and I'm like, you hit this touch screen and it turns on. He hits the touch screen and it does not turn on. And what I'm used to is people come up to my coffee maker and they go like tap and it doesn't turn on the touch screen because you have to like touch the touch screen for it to work. And so I'm like, it'll work. Boom, it doesn't come on for me either. I'm like, I've literally turned this thing on maybe 15 times in the last 24 hours as I'm adding things and that sort of thing. And what had happened is the GFI breaker had tripped. And so he turns it back on, the swim spa comes on, and then it trips again. And I'm like, FML, like we've just finally gotten this thing working. And now I've got something like that's tripping the ground breaker, which usually means don't put your body in the swim spa, right? Because water and electricity don't mix. Well, and he's just like, just go and I'll figure it out and whatever. Because once there's something like this, I start asking a lot of questions and it usually annoys everybody around me because I like to ask questions. So I leave and he just kind of looks at it and I come back because I forgot my wallet and he is glaring at the breaker box. It's an outdoor breaker box, outdoor service that services my roasting shack and the swim spa. So then I don't even talk to him. I'm like, he obviously doesn't want me asking questions. He's confused about why I came home, but it was because I drove off without my wallet, which was stupid. And then I got my wallet, drove mom to the airport, and I'm about halfway to the airport. And I get a message on Zello saying, I need you to call the electric company to come out here and turn off the power. And here's what had happened. When the electric company installed the new line, which is overhead to a pole, what happens is the line goes from the transformer to a weatherhead, which is at the top of the pole. It's how it comes in. It goes down conduit into a meter base. They put a meter on, and then on the other side of that is a breaker board with breakers. Okay. And then from the breaker board, it goes different places underground. Sorry for the big thump for everybody. I just accidentally got a little too enthusiastic with my hands and I hit the microphone. So what had happened when they came from the transformer to the weatherhead is the wires are coming in higher than the weatherhead in such a way that when it rains, water is running down the wire into the conduit, into the meter base, and then into the breaker board all over the breakers. And it's probably been this way for 2 years because it's not like I spend time when it's raining outside looking at my outdoor breaker box going, is it wet in here? Is there raindrop like falling down? But it just so happened that on Saturday, some rain came through, like right as we were swimming. And it filled up the breaker box with water. And the GFI did not like that at all, right? So it also meant because of the way the water was coming in, there's three wires coming in. There's a neutral and two hots. And all of those are kind of close to each other getting wet. And do you know what water does? It conducts electricity. Do you know what that means? That means it's possible that electricity was going back through that neutral, right? So that it could have been backfeeding the system the whole time. This has been going on for 2 years. And it has not caught on fire. But I will tell you this, it has almost caught a plug on fire in my roasting shack because I had one plug that I was very mystified about why it looked like it had been getting hot. That's being replaced right now because I saw it and I was like, well, we got to replace that and then keep an eye on this and make sure we don't have another problem. Pretty sure the problem was that. Okay. So they come out and they like tape the opening so that the water can't get down it. And then it continued to drip water into the box for another 24 hours. And that finally stopped. And then the GFI breaker just was toast. It did not like its life. And so I had to source another GFI breaker. But actually, as a result of in there, we realized that like the corrosion inside this box, because water's just been like coming into it from outside, is amazing. So why am I talking about this under Operation Independence? A new breaker has been put in safely, and I was able to use the swim spa, so that was kind of cool. But it's a good thing that this happened. It may sound annoying. It's going to cost money. But you know what didn't happen is we didn't backfeed the electric system and kill a lineman. We didn't catch my whole shack on fire or my roaster on fire. We didn't fry the swim spa, and nobody here got hurt. And the only reason we noticed this was going on was that we put in a GFI breaker, and it's did what it was designed to do, which was not work when it was wet. Um, so the cool thing is we have enough skills to be able to keep things like get things back up and running for now. I'm actually reaching back out to the power company to see what they're willing to do as far as like it was their mistake. And I had just paid, $2,500 or so to pay an electrician to do that work, to be able to even put that service in. And now we've got to redo the work because the breakers are like they're bad corroded. They're getting replaced. And so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But the good news is I didn't have to wait 6 weeks for an electrician to come in to deal with this situation. Like we've got it going now, or pay emergency fees. And you know, it's funny how 20 years ago, Nicole would have been like, oh, my life is over. This whole horrible thing happened to me. It was beyond my control. And like now it's like, wow, I'm really glad that wasn't worse because that could have been way worse than it was. That's kind of how I felt about my car accident too. I was pretty sure after my car accident in April that my car was totaled. And we got through the day and I sat down. AJ was visiting and I was like, you know what? I can't even feel mad about the fact that my car is probably totaled right now because I didn't get hurt at all. And that's kind of amazing because my car got really whacked. And that it's a perspective thing, maybe. It's kind of fun. Anyway, that's so under Operation Independence, I didn't have to pay a guy to come out and put in a breaker and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of that. So that would probably be, if I'm going to talk about what we put in the Independence Fund for that, I spent $175 on the replacement breaker today, which is in the negative column because I just paid $175 for that breaker 4 days ago. So, but what I didn't pay was another, 2 hours at an electrician's rate of $140 an hour. That's $280 to install it. And I also didn't ruin my capacity to roast coffee completely by frying my roaster. So there's that. That's a much higher price tag. So I have maintained my capacity, and I sent an email to everybody. Your orders are going to be late today because I'm not going to be able to start roasting till right after this. Well, it's actually back up, guys, now. So I'll be able to start roasting after this podcast. And then we'll get more orders out tomorrow. That's just the way it is. I just didn't do them in the morning. Life goes on. That's what it is to run a business. You ready for the main topic of today's show? Life is a choice. Life is a choice. That's not quite right. It's a highway and I want to ride it. I got to thinking about some hopeless situations this weekend. Not the electrical stuff, but just other people's hopeless situations. And it made me realize or think about like how often do we make a choice that doesn't go how we expect it to go? Does that ever happen to anybody here? It's like, well, that didn't go like I thought it would, but here we are. But then I started thinking, okay, yeah, sure, life is a choice. But you say that to people or you hear that and you're like, yeah, but I'm stuck where I'm stuck because I'm stuck here. It's like October isn't Octobering the way October usually Octobers. And hopeless situations happen from time to time in your life. And they happen from time to time in other people's lives. And you can spend a long time talking about how you got here. But does that matter? Or is it time to think about how to get out of here? And there's been so many hopeless situations come up in the last couple of months, close to us, near and dear to our hearts with all the flooding that's happened from Hurricane Helene and all of that. And just people in the network passing away and all of these things that when I think about hopeless situations, I have to ask, is it really hopeless? Is it really hopeless? So let's say, so then I was like, well, what is a hopeless situation really, right? Like you get into this thing where you're like, it feels hopeless, but maybe it really isn't hopeless. Like it was hopeless for me on Saturday that I would be able to swim again on Saturday because there was no way to get power to that swim spot in a safe way. It was a hopeless situation. Not really, because long term it'll get fixed. But well, what if you have somebody dying in your life and you got to take care of them? And then because it's so hard to take care of them, you need to choose, do I go to work or take care of this person? You choose to take care of that person, and now you don't have money coming in because you're not that's a hopeless situation. Because the immediate crisis situation that needs to be dealt with right here in front of you is hopeless. There's no changing that. And the end result has a long-term impact on you financially. That's a hopeless situation. Or it is, the mid 1200s and a troop of soldiers comes through your village and it's winter is just starting and they're coming through with all of their men and whatever horses they have, and they ravage everything and take all of your food stores, and you now are looking at a winter time in Northern Europe, say, and you can't start growing vegetables now, and they've taken all your livestock, and that's a hopeless situation, isn't it? Or you come to work and they announce that you better take your stuff off your desk because they're going out of business. There is no money. You're not getting severance, and you don't have any savings. That's a hopeless situation, right? Or a prominent group of people in your field, let's say your field is music, are bad mouthing you as a corrupt musician, and it's costing you gigs, which is hitting your bottom line. And you don't know exactly where the gossip's coming from, or you do, but you can't do anything to change it because it's just a bunch of people who are prominent talking bad about you behind your back. It's not even a face-on assault. That's a hopeless situation. There's nothing you can do about it, right? You're hit by a subway train, and you're one of those people that gets like twisted and the train stops and you're still alive, but the minute they get you out of there, what's going to happen is you're going to die. You're sitting there. It's your last moments. You know it's going to happen when they take you out, but you're still alive now, so you know it's hopeless. Or you're stuck at a job. You're stuck at a job because your family needs the health insurance that you get through this job, and they need the income, and you hate your job every day you go to your job. Every single day you go in there, you're like, I hate this job, but if I leave this job, then we don't survive. Or you're at home and a tidal wave of mud comes sliding down the hill because 42 inches of rain just fell, and your whole neighborhood is wiped away and you're the only survivor. That's a hopeless situation, right? When I tell you all those examples, some of you have had that example actually happen in your life. Some of you are in the middle of it right now. Some of you know people in the middle of it right now. Some of you have lost people to those things. But the question that comes up is that really hopeless? It feels hopeless is different than it is hopeless. I would say even the person who is hit by the metro system, twisted around and knows they're going to die as soon as they're let out of there, has some hope. Their goal may have just changed. Their goal is no longer, how do I stay alive? It's, how do I pass something on of value? In that situation, before you die, you can still sign a trust and make things a little easier on the people who are going to inherit your stuff. You can still say things. You can still apologize to your girlfriend if you had a fight with her before you left. You can still tell your mom you love them or your kids you love them, or at least leave a recording about it. So it may be hopeless for you to be able to live, but if you reassess your goal, then it is more hopeful. The reason I was going down this whole track of hopelessness is that every time a situation happens that is of this kind, the first person to act and make a difference is you. You know, like John Willis has that shirt, "You are your own first responder," right? That's that's a way deeper statement than you realize. It's you'll lose your job. Let's go to that one. Find out they went out of business, no paycheck coming in. I don't have any savings. Bills are going to still come in. I'm going to be out of a home, not be able to feed my family, not be able to blah, 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 blah. Like all of those things. You are your own first responder. What is the first thing you should do in that situation? The person who has to do something right then is you. It's not like go to the government, apply for unemployment, wait for them to assess your application, and then eventually get unemployment. I mean, sure, that may be in the package of things you do, but what's the fastest way to get money in that situation? The fastest way I can think of is go home and look at what you can sell and list it on Marketplace and start selling your shit. You can start taking gigs on Fiverr if you have those skills. You can, if your car's nice enough, you can start driving Uber. If it's not nice enough, there are a whole bunch of other things you can do. I saw Toolman Tim was live with John Willis today, and he was talking about, Tim was talking about when he started his handyman business, he was picking up dog poop. So the first thing and to be done is something with a goal in mind of what you need to deal with. And the first person that can do something is you. And if you're legitimately in a situation where the first person who can do something is not you, then the second person who can do something is somebody close to you. And that goes to your community around you, right? So you are your own first responder. You've got to get started on something. By the time the government gets there to help you, it's often too late. It's often way too late. You've already bounced a check if in the job situation, you've already bounced a check by the time you're waiting for your first unemployment check, which is going to be, I don't know, they used to be $202 a week or something. I don't even remember. Something like that. I've never actually successfully collected unemployment in my life, so I don't remember. I tried one time, and the application process took so much time that I decided my time was better spent looking for work. And so I went out and found work. And I technically qualified for a few weeks of unemployment that I never collected because it was, and that's what they want, right? They want people like me to get frustrated and not collect on it. But I was just like, my goal is money in. My goal is not how do I make the government pay me money. If the goal is how do I make the government pay me money, I would live a very different life than I do right now. So you have to act on behalf of others because nobody's coming to save you and nobody is coming to save them. And that's been really illustrated. Like a tidal wave mudslide happens in North Carolina, and I'm not going to say the government's done nothing. What I'm going to say is that the best forward momentum that's happened there has been from dude helping dude or dudette helping dudette, like people helping each other because they're like, well, I know there's a neighborhood that's over there on the other side of that mudslide, and I know there's not another road into it. And so we need to check on those people and see if they're okay. And then once we get there, we need to figure out how to work together to be okay. And this is what's interesting about that situation. In the dystopian novels, stuff goes bad, and within moments, people are killing each other for stuff. And that's not what's been going on. It's been a month of trying to get people, to be able to leave places, to get access to resources and all of that. And what you see going on is a huge community effort to just figure it out together. And that's an interesting data point when you think about disasters, right? That doesn't mean there hasn't been any violence there. I'm sure there has. I haven't heard of any specific violence that I can verify. I just know that it's possible. because there's violence everywhere every day. Somebody in Smithville, Tennessee probably got punched in the nose today. I don't know who, I don't know where, but it probably happened. So we got to stop waiting to be rescued by the government. We've got to stop waiting to be rescued by outside entities. And we have to take responsibility for being the rescuer, both for ourselves and for other people around us. Because if we can't get past that, then we don't get past the hopeless things that happen. And the only way we turn those hopeless things around is we do it. We take responsibility for it. And that goes back to knowing your true goal. So I say life is a choice, by which I mean when you see and hear about terrible things, or when they happen to you, it's your choice to make it better, or it's your choice to do nothing. And I would qualify do nothing as I pay my taxes so the government can fix it. When you do that and you know your true goal, things do start getting better. You have to know, accept responsibility for, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. This is what I can do to make it better. This is what my goal is. This is what the current reality of the situation is. And this is the one or two things I can do right now to get closer to that goal. And then the other part of that is start asking yourself, how am I wasting time? How am I wasting time? I had a long talk with Sean Mills this weekend, and he came up on a camp of people wanting to help people. And what was going on is that there's all these needs, and then everybody would run towards helping the needs, and you'd end up with, 4 times as many people helping this one need over here. So people standing around, not doing anything, and then 4 other needs that they hadn't heard about because they left to go help with that need. And then these other needs came in. And so you had too much resource one place and not enough resource somewhere else. And one of the things he was able to do was establish a system whereby people submitted needs, and then they could prioritize which ones were more, urgent. And then they could say that's a 4-person need, that's an 8-person need, that's a 15-person need, and send people out. And in this way, they handled more needs, right? So how are you wasting time? A really good example of wasting time is not thinking through what needs are on something. So really, there's always a choice. There's a choice if you hate your job and you're keeping it because you need insurance and income for your family, and you feel hopeless and you can't get out, you have a choice. You have a choice. Your choice is make a change and risk not having some of those things, or decide that the family's more important and they're worth investing time in at your job, in which case go all in at your job to do that thing to get the benefit, and then leave it all at the job. And guess what? Suddenly, when you're not at the job, you have time to do something else. You have time to start building something new. You have time to pursue things that can actually move you out of that situation. But if you waste your time thinking about the past, how I got here, how I'm trapped, how I can't do anything, and how somebody else should surely come and rescue you, then you don't take advantage of that time you've been wasting. And we waste a lot of time in life. It's very easy to waste time, right? Pivot when you need to pivot. Live in the now and build the future rather than living in the past. If you live in the past or always look towards the past, it's very hard to move forward. And then take back your time, because that's your most precious resource. If you are trading time as a wage slave towards a goal, and that goal is like legitimately your goal, then that time as a wage slave is not wasted. But if you're just doing that because you don't know what else to do, it's time to decide. It's time to make the choice to do things that are moving you towards your goal, because you're the only person who can change it. And you're also the only person who can help other people change it. And that's exactly the same in the crisis situation, right? If you have a car accident and you're still mobile and the person next to you has an arterial bleed, you're their first responder and you may be the reason they live. If you have an arterial bleed and one moving hand and a tourniquet nearby, you're your first responder and you're keeping yourself alive until you can get to actual help, because help is never as close as you need it to be, which is why we have to be our own help. And once we accept that, everything starts making a whole lot more sense. It's easier to say no to stuff. It's easier to let go of anxiousness over gossip and subterfuge that happens, because that just happens. That's how humans are, right? It's easier to keep focusing on the things that you can do that you're best at to move forward. And that's really what we're all trying to do here. And none of that has anything to do with politics or who I'm voting for or what's going on right now. Do I care from a situational awareness standpoint? Yeah. But am I glued to the TV watching every whatever that's going on? No, because that's looking backwards again. I'm tired of looking backwards. I want to look forwards. I want to go forwards and I want to choose prosperity. And the only way I can do that is be the best at the things I choose to be the best at and let go of the things I'm not going to do or that I don't want to do or that don't serve this, right? Anyway, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. Find out more about that at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week.